Hello, everybody, and welcome to This is Surveying. I'm your host, Nina Young, and I'm pleased to welcome today's guest, which is Rosie Wills. Rosie Wills is a building surveyor based in the south, I believe, Rosie?
Yep, in the southwest, the north coast of the southwest.
Lovely. Welcome, though. Welcome, Rosie. I'm pleased to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
You're welcome. So what I'd like to do is, if we start with just you talking a little bit about your background, I guess, sort of how you've got to today. And because I know we've had some prior discussions to the podcast around your background in housing and then the move to residential and things like that. If you could just sort of give a little bit about who you are, really.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do it slightly different to what I'd normally do it. So I'm a chartered construction manager and ASSOC RICS member. I'm working in private practice now, but for 10 years up until May this year, a little bit more than 10 years, I've been working in social housing in various roles. And I did a podcast a little while ago with Simon Jones, Air Quality Matters, that just kind of explained, so I'm not going to repeat too much, but I ended up developing a specialism in damp and mould. So that's a lot of what I've talked about up until now.
Yes.
It's definitely my specialist subject. Do like talking about it. But what I thought I'd kind of do, just because I think it would be useful because of my transition into private practice, is kind of how that ended up happening.
Mm.
So the reason why I ended up going through the chartered construction manager route, it was when I was still working in social housing. I ended up doing everything a little bit backwards. So kind of learning how to do stuff. And it was quite a vocational process of understanding building pathology and damp and mould and everything like that, and realised that I was doing things like attending court, and you have to write down what your background is and what your level of expertise and qualification is. And up until that point, it was a few A levels and a management qualification, which wasn't really that applicable. And I really didn't want to do housing management qualification, so I ended up thinking I want to do something. I want to get some credibility. So I did the Chartered Institute of Buildings qualification to become, and their chartered membership program, and it was really, really good, but it was really challenging. And at the beginning, I thought, do you know what? Other people do this, I can do it. And then started, and then instantly thought, oh my God, I can't do this. I don't know any of this stuff. And the very first, I think even before the first session, we got given all this paperwork, and it was the plans for some sort of building that we would be working on. And I was looking at the diagram thinking, I don't even know what any of these things were. It was a little circle with a dot in the middle. I was like, if I don't know this, I'm not going to know anything. And then the first meeting, they said, that's a tree. I was like, I know what a tree is. Like, I get this. I'm probably going to be okay. And then went through this up and down of being confident. Okay, yeah, I do get this, and realised the benefit of being in responsive repairs and ongoing maintenance of older buildings, and the value that can bring to understanding construction.
Right.
So then got really confident, then the usual confidence knocks throughout the process, and then ended up being a chartered construction manager. And then that allowed me to become ASSOC RICS. But it was just with the intention of upskilling, becoming more professional. And I didn't realise that would actually allow me to become a residential surveyor later down the line. That was never my intention. Okay. But when it got to the point where I didn't want to work in social housing anymore, I had an opportunity to move across to Nova Surveyors, which is what I've done now. And I primarily do home buyer surveys, a little bit of damp and mould, specific defect surveys, but I carry on delivering training and coaching to social housing professionals on the side, because I wasn't quite ready to let go of it.
You do training as well, don't you?
Yeah. So I kind of spend the reason why I delayed moving across to private sector was because I really didn't want to give up the variety of what I did in social housing. But then I realised actually when I started in social housing, it was a very linear role, and I made it my own. So then I had a conversation with my now boss to say, listen, if I came across, would you let me, if I worked really hard and I do my bare minimum of what I need to do, would you let me have a day or two a week to work on pet projects and social value projects? And he was more than happy with that. So that's allowed me to build my own role where I am. And part of that is I don't want to lose any of the knowledge that I built up in social housing before and just leave that career, but to carry on delivering it in a different way. So that's
Yes.
been really good.
What are the differences between then that you've seen moving from housing to sort of residential?
Well, it's less stressful for one.
Okay.
I think every job or every career that I've had has gradually got less stressful, and I think that's a personal choice. That my motivation now is to be. I've loved every job that I've done. Genuinely, I've loved it, but I just really want to be happy in work and home life. And I've got a really nice balance now of I love every single Monday, and I did before, but I love every single Monday, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and weekends. So definitely a little bit less stress, but it kind of puts it all into perspective. So I appreciate the benefits that I've got now. But in terms of professionally, one of the biggest differences that I found is the networking and the willingness to share information across
Okay.
professionals. That was one of the big things that I discovered probably a little bit too late in my career in social housing, was how important it is to network with other professionals. When I started doing that, my development was exponential, and it just saved me reinventing the wheel in lots of ways. And then now I've moved across into a completely different sector where it's commercial. So there's going to be a level where people are less likely to share information. But having
So
seen the benefit,
it's more guarded. It's more guarded, so people, because they're competing with each other locally. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
yeah. So in social housing, I could speak to people who worked in exactly the same areas and maybe owned properties in the same streets as we did, but there wasn't any commercial interest either way, because people move into homes where they have the opportunity to move into social housing. So we could talk about our successes, and we could just give someone a whole policy or a whole procedure and say, this is what we're doing and it's working really well, and it wouldn't disadvantage us or our residents in any way. And equally, we could
Right.
say, we did this and it went terribly wrong, don't do it. And they would do it to us, and they'd say, we invested loads of money in this project, it didn't work out, so don't bother. And again, there was no risk to us talking about where we'd got things wrong. Whereas in, I guess, any commercial or private sector, I think there's a worry that if you tell someone what's gone really well, that someone might steal it and take it into their business and then take business away from you.
Mm.
Or, just anything about, people worrying about their reputation. So it's better to keep it guarded and secret rather than share
Yes.
information. And we're probably all trying to figure out the same things in our own little areas without
Absolutely,
actually
you
sharing.
definitely are. Yeah, because I speak to so many residential surveyors, and it's always the same things, same challenges, same concerns, complaints, PI, getting your business, getting clients, visibility. It is always the same thing. And so how have you kind of dealt with it? Is there anything you're doing at the moment? Do you do sort of any local networking, or what kind of things have you been doing sort of in that space?
Oh, so it's really, really early days at the moment, because I've been trying to find my feet in terms of actually figuring out what my job is and how to do it well.
Yeah.
And that's still obviously in progress. What I've just to kind of toe in the water, what I have done is I reached out to a local surveyor, but someone who's quite junior like me, and it was someone that I'd just happened to. I had an introduction, so and when you meet someone and you think this is someone who doesn't have a lot of ego, just someone who seemed like a bit of a safe bet, and just reached out and said, listen, it seems like we're in a similar position. How do you feel about just doing a peer review of each other's surveys? Because I'm doing this, I'm basing what I'm doing on my employer, my mentor, who's done it for years, and I'm pretty confident in how it's done. And if I received a copy of this report, I think I'd be happy. But would you just look over it and tell me, is it actually a good report? Because I've got no idea really what a level 2 survey should look like. What's a good one? What's a bad one? And then we did a little bit of a swap. So we each took 3 of our surveys of various kind of types of properties, and then just shared and did a swap and said, well, this is great. I really like that. I'm going to take that into what I'm doing. But this one, I think you're kind of opening up a bit of a risk for yourself there, or this isn't great. Or, for example, one of the bits of feedback, which is great, is it says, your report says appears to 156 times. It either is or it isn't. So, and it was really good feedback to say, actually,
Yeah.
sometimes it is appears, because it's only a spot inspection, but if it's a plastic tank in a loft, it doesn't appear to be a plastic tank, it is a plastic tank. So just take out the appears there. And it's stuff that when you're looking through it in isolation, you can't see it yourself, but that peer review just helped to pick up really small things like that make a big difference.
It's priceless, that kind of feedback, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was really, really helpful. And then I think we're just planning on doing that, repeating it again, maybe in 6 months or so. And then potentially just making it a little bit wider, maybe finding a few other trusted surveyors and hopefully doing something similar or on a bigger scale with either that organisation or another similar local surveying firm to then look at other information that we've got, other data and compare and contrast. And
I think it's a great idea. I know this does go on, but it is very much micro, and most people don't even talk. Like most surveyors wouldn't even want to admit that they're getting their report reviewed. Never mind someone else looking at it. Never mind getting feedback and potential criticism, or and positives and negatives. So I think it does take. I think there is the commercial angle. I think it does take confidence. I think
it was scary.
You're opening yourself. Yeah, you're opening yourself up. You've got to be brave, haven't you? And like, tell me what's wrong. It's not easy for anyone to do that kind of thing, but I think it's great that you're doing that, because it's like seeing you mentioned ego as well. Is that something that you think plays quite a part in the whole the lack of sort of almost sharing, collaborating? Do you think that plays a part? Is it?
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes I think some people, I think it's easy to believe that you're right and to believe that you're really good, but it's easy to carry on with that belief if you're not willing to ever put it to the test. I think the only way to carry on developing is to be willing to be wrong and to be willing to maybe have a bad survey. But the only way that you'd ever know is to get someone to look at it, tell you so. So I think if you're, I guess that's the thing, if you're not willing to have someone look over it, you're probably not proud enough of what you're delivering.
That's true. And I think more and more, because I've spoken to surveyors about, the peer review thing, and that being another pair of eyes, because obviously you've got to do the reflection, you've got to reflect and, try and review your own work. But as you say, if you've used to doing something a certain way for, say, 20 years, for example, there is that whole presumption I'm right. But how do you know if that's how our clients reading that report? Have you adapted and changed for the way people have changed and how they interpret things?
Definitely. And things do change a lot. And I think that this isn't a generalization, because not everyone's like it, but there are certain fields, and I think surveying might be one of it, where there's a bit of an element of people wanting to be right and wanting to be seen to be right. And you do see it on LinkedIn a little bit, where people are desperate to correct other people. And even if it's, right overall, it's just to pick up any tiny perceived error, or to, make the point about, I know this and this is my level of expertise and you're wrong. And sometimes it's just completely unnecessary. And it does get people's backs up a bit and makes people a bit nervous about saying something, because you think, oh, I want to share this. And I do it every time. Part of the being transparent and helping other people that are coming through, maybe just behind me, because I see it from other people when people share, like the likes of Russell Rafton and really great videos that say, this is my survey, this is what I've done, this is what I found. That can be really helpful. But there's always going to be one person to go, well, I would have done it differently. And every time I post something, I think, oh God, what is someone going to look at this and absolutely slate me? But I just think I'll just do it, and if I've got to learn from it.
You're brave, Rosie, because this is the thing. Like, the majority of surveyors I know and speak to do not post on LinkedIn at all, because of the fear of reproach, because of the fear of criticism, because there is a lot of that, sadly. And usually the ones that want to be right are usually the ones that are most present and likely to post, likely to comment. And sadly, there are so many amazing professionals out there that I just wish would post and share some of their knowledge and insights, but they won't. They won't, because it's a public platform and there's certain characters. But I think it's great that, because I have seen a lot of your posts, which I think are great, and I've also seen comments, and I'm like, yeah, here we go. It's just always the same, isn't it? It's like, there is always that. But I think just people like yourself and others that are more and more doing that and just dealing with it in a really professional way. You know, this isn't about, everyone has opinions. There's nothing wrong with opinions, but I think it's also in how you deliver them. And I think, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I think sometimes just people maybe not being able to see the bigger picture. And it came up at a recent webinar that it was general rules or general principles for diagnostics of damp, and that what was in the webinar was that in the context of social housing, which is typically post-war properties, rising damp's relatively rare. And if you see something that looks like rising damp, 90% of the time, it's probably not going to be. And you should look at condensation and penetrating dampness, raised ground levels, things like that. But the comments was just non-stop. Rising damp does exist. Rising damp is really common. You think, yeah, in the greater, the wider environment, yeah, but if you're looking at post-war properties, probably not. But it's just, people love talking about rising damp. People love the argument, which is I normally steer away from it in any way, shape or form. But it just happened to come up, and you just think, yeah, it's just, you're missing the point that this is in the context of social housing, and the important message is a boy died and we need to do something about it. But someone wanted to be right.
Have you noticed any changes in surveying, like changes with attitudes or changes with younger generations coming in? Just curious as to you have observed anything.
Yeah, I think I probably am a little bit too new into it to really know what's changed or what it was like before. I think the main thing that I've observed is there seems to be conflict between people who do residential surveying and people who do general building and defect surveying. And it seems to be, the conflict seems to be around a lack of understanding about the RICS Home Survey Standard and what the actual purpose and scope of any RICS product is. And you see it, the arguments between people, but you just think, if you really wanted to have an argument, I think you should probably read the standard first and understand what the point of a home buyer survey is, whether there's an argument here.
I think I know what you're referring to, though. There's the finger pointing, especially between, for example, the independent damp and timber surveyors and, you know, RICS surveyors. Like you say, the scope of a level 2 survey is not the same as someone going in and investigating and doing an intrusive survey of a particular damp problem.
Yeah.
So different.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of that. Well, I'm interested to get your thoughts, but I've noticed at the end of the day, a lot of level 2 surveys and surveyors, they will refer to, you need to have an independent damp survey done.
Yeah.
So there is a passing of work across to these independent damp surveyors. And yet there is also the complaints from the damp surveyors that, why didn't they do X, Y, and Z? Why didn't they do this? And well, that's not actually in the scope. And I've always found that interesting, is that actually, on one hand, they complain about the surveys and that they haven't gone in depth enough, and why am I getting this? But it's actually, it passes on work. And then you've got it the other way. Yeah, so I think it's interesting that you've picked up on that, because I think that is a real big issue, is that many don't understand the scope of how far you go with a level 2 and then obviously a level 3, and you're not lifting up floorboards.
Yeah. And I think it's the conflict comes from some areas of poor practice, but then it's just a blanket application of this must be terrible. And I think that there definitely is, in any level of survey, some poor practice where someone will take a damp meter reading and say it needs further investigation, but at level 2 or 3 there should still be an element of following the trail and identifying possible causes so that people can inform decisions. But there will always be something in there to say, this is what I've seen, I've followed the trail, here's your most likely causes that definitely need to be resolved, but you may need to have a specialist.
Yeah.
The same with drainage, same with anything else where you can't see everything. It's a spot inspection. So I think there's sometimes poor practice, but then it's just become a blanket approach to say it's terrible that any RICS surveyor would ever refer to an independent damp surveyor.
I think it's also because a lot of surveyors operate at different levels. Like, you know, I've seen so many different, the scope of a level 2, despite it being a level 2 RICS survey, some will go much further and some will charge more for that, which is fine. And I think that's it. So not everybody does apply. It's a guide. Not everybody does apply and do the. Some will do more. Some will check all the windows, even on a level 2.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think that doesn't help, because obviously, and I see the new students coming through, and you're like, it's very difficult to know, because they could shadow one surveyor and they'll do it one way, and another do it in another way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where we are. And the person who I did the peer reviewing, I think they're really similar, which is what we're doing, what we're delivering is what we're comfortable delivering, which is kind of a level 2.5. And it's everything that's within the scope of a level 2, but probably going a little bit above and beyond and giving more information, because I think, well, why not? You've got to be, that's an organisational, and it's an attitude sort of thing, which is, we want to deliver good service, and if you know it, you should put it in there. And we're willing to take the risk with that. There is always an extra liability if you're giving more information than what you need to give.
Yeah.
There is an increased risk of claims, but organisationally, we're all on the same thought process, which is we're happy to take that risk, and we will all take that risk because we want to be consistent, and that's the level of survey that we offer, and we charge slightly more because it is a level 2.5, but we don't want to deliver just a level 2. You know, we want something that we're happy with. What would I want to receive if I commissioned that level of survey? And I'm pretty comfortable with it. Other people aren't. Other people would want to charge level 2 prices and do an exact, and that's fine if you stick to the scope. But everyone, whatever you're doing, it's got to be consistent.
That's it, I guess. It's the consistency, not so much how much you do. It's being consistent every time and providing that standard of service that people expect, you know, the client expects, and the price that you charge reflects that.
Yeah.
Because you're right, everyone does charge different rates. One of the things that we mentioned before we started the podcast was you mentioned something which I thought was brilliant. It was to do with estate agents and CPD.
Yeah. So this is coming into an organisation, completely fresh eyes, and I think this normally only lasts for the first few months that you're somewhere, and then your workload builds up and you don't have time for all the nice stuff. But what I'd found is we'd had a few conversations with agents in my kind of early months, and we had, just as an example, I spoke to a few agents who'd contacted to say, you know, the survey's been done, but the buyer's pulled out, which the vendor just wanted to double check, is there anything really dangerous that they need to resolve straight away? And then we had a few other issues where it was properties that were in really, really good condition. And I've seen this more and more now, is that the better the property condition is, the more likely it is to fall through after a survey. And the agents were saying the same, was that it's the expectations are either really high, so any minor issue that would have been completely predictable anyway, or that it's people that use the survey as an excuse to pull out, even though there's nothing really risky in the survey.
Interesting. Okay.
And we had another agent who we don't work with a lot who'd said, are you in, you know, do you want more referrals? We've been using a different local surveyor, but they keep flagging issues with the cavity wall ties and making recommendations. And I'd said, if it's a property that's older than this, it's a really valid claim. So it's a really valid risk to flag. So absolutely send business our way, but we're not going to do any different than that surveyor because they were doing the right thing. Didn't get any more business from them, obviously. But what I thought was, rather than just have these isolated conversations and risk the damaging relationship with agents because of them not knowing what goes on inside a survey and what actually happens, what we decided to put together, and I was really nervous about doing this because I've done lots of training and things like that, but it was a completely different environment. I'd contacted a few of our local agents and said, look, we're offering free CPD sessions, like a breakfast or a lunch session, and it was keeping your sales on track. So in relation to the survey. So it was just a really quick session, half an hour with a kind of Q&A sort of thing to say, this is the proportion of people that actually commission home buyer surveys. These are the reasons why sales fall down, and some of them are related to the survey. So it's kind of within our control. This is the background. These are the risks, and kind of used the heart versus large as an idea of what happens if we don't report effectively. And then just went through and said, these are the kind of things that we pick up. This is what we look at. And this is what you can advise your vendors before they even list the property. So we're going to look at drains. And if someone has got a massive plant pot over the top of the drain, or they built a shed over a drain, we have to report to say we haven't been able to inspect it. So them making sure that the drains are accessible is really important, because we're not going to have that. Here's an example of the cracks that we see, and these ones aren't of concern. So if your vendors are concerned about cracks, they don't need to be worried about this. We'd only be concerned if it was this much. So again, if your buyers start to talk about this, doesn't matter. It does worry people sometimes. So your vendors could actually redecorate just before they sell it, so that people aren't worried. Damp and mould, if you've got an empty property, if it's in probate, if you can, put the heating on at 60 degrees.
Yeah.
Because it's going to feel warm. It's not going to smell damp, because we're going to say there's a musty odour in there. There's no signs of dampness, or there's slightly elevated readings everywhere because it's empty. We will put it into proportion, but some people are going to be scared off. So your vendors can just do these. So, and then off the back of those conversations, which was really, really good, they were really good sessions, and we ended up running a few more. We then developed a leaflet that we then gave to the agents to give to vendors, how to get your property sale and survey ready. And it's just a checklist of check things: make sure your gutters are clear, make sure your drains are clear, make sure you have your heating on to this level, make sure, just a list of basic things that and it helped, I think, with that relationship with agents, that they understood why we were doing what we were doing. They understood that our surveys aren't just full of further investigations, that some of it was preventable. And then on top of that, we've had a couple that have just happened by accident, where the agents, they come on a survey with us and we've just talked them through, this is what we're doing, one space. Yeah. So, I think we'll just carry on doing little bits like that. So either a refresher for people who've been doing it for a while, or just ongoing CPD for new starters. But it's been really, really good.
How has it been received? Has light bulb moments happen for these agents? Like, oh, okay. Because there is so much misconceptions, and why are electrics always red kind of comment, like you know, that kind of thing. How has it helped?
Yeah, I think it's been really helpful. We've had some really good feedback, and I think we're going to try and roll it out a little bit wider, because again, it doesn't really change the amount of work that we get coming through agents. It's not for that. It's just improving the relationships that we've got already. And we want to, if we've got local agents that we work with and they have other branches outside of our area that we're never going to deal with, that we'd still do it across everyone, because then they understand, and having gone off on a bit of a sidetrack, I did watch that panorama on agents a little while ago. And it's really nice that the agents that we work with, I don't see that at all. I don't see that misconduct. And it's, I think, because they're smaller, they're local firms kind of like us. So it really makes sense to carry on that good practice, because like us, they've kind of generally got the right intentions. And it's just everyone working together as in partnership, I suppose, but maintaining independence.
It is. It's collaborating and helping the whole process along. Because as soon as you get rid of misconceptions, misunderstandings, it can run a lot smoother.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we did as well, and it was kind of off the back of that, and it just happened that it coincided with the home buying and selling reform. Like, we started doing this about a month before that consultation opened, which was every now and then you get properties that they're difficult to sell for a number of reasons. And we thought, well, it's not going to be that popular, but we'll offer it. Is a kind of a bespoke survey that is for pre-sale. So it's a vendor survey, so they can organise a survey of their own property. And it's kind of tailored for people that really need a quick sale, people who have high value properties that are these kind of well-maintained, high value, that tend to fall through because of fickle buyers, I think. And then just slightly complicated properties that you have the survey done beforehand, so that either they can use it to get the essential repairs done so that it's not going to fall through at the last minute, or they can make sure that the property is valued appropriately. And they can offer that survey to their buyer. So we've had one done already with an independent surveyor, and then that buyer can buy the survey for, I think, £75, and it gets transferred into their name, so they have the the insurance backed bit of it. And we've done that a few times, where it just means that the sellers are ready and prepared. And again, it's off the back of the agent's feedback to say, we've got a few properties that we're struggling with. Is there any way that we could do something? And it's just putting something in place that is not something we offer a lot, but just having it there just gives that little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, and also for how things are going to pan out. I mean, we don't know yet, but with the
Yeah,
whole
and
reform.
it's all a bit of an unknown, but it goes
Mm.
to show that even if it doesn't come out as a widespread thing, there's probably a need for vendor surveys and for people that just want it to go really smoothly. Just have it there, and then maybe the buyer's less likely to want to commission their own survey because there's already something there. Or it might be a
Mm.
top-up survey, I guess.
There's some really good things coming out of our conversation, Rosie. I think people are going to find the things that you're doing very, very helpful. And I can imagine that some people, some listeners are going to be going, oh, I might try that myself.
Yeah, and
Building those relationships with estate agents is really good.
yeah, and I think that's the thing. You've got to be principled and you've got to be really independent. So you think there's not a lot that we can offer to agents when you're like that, because you can't change anything that you do in terms of what you're reporting on.
Mm.
So we just had to think outside the box with it. I think, how do we actually keep everyone on the same page without bowing to the pressure of saying, oh, okay, we're annoying the agents because every now and then sales fall through. Maybe we should not word it like that, but then we're doing our clients a disadvantage by not reporting properly.
One thing I'm curious, and I like to ask people is, what is it you enjoy about what you do?
I'm easily pleased. I've enjoyed every single job that I've done, even if it's a really technically boring job. I think I've always liked report writing. I've always liked, in one form or another, looking at some sort of data or evidence or something and then interpreting it one way or another and then putting it into a report so that other people understand, whether that's, any sort of investigation. So I used to do quite a lot of disciplinary investigations in my old job.
Oh,
And damp and mould investigations, obviously data analysis, so looking at data of our whole housing stock and then translating it into something that makes sense to residents or to boards or whatever else. And it's that same sort of thing is built in massively to home buyer
mm,
surveys. Generally, it's just the variety. I think working in my local area is quite nice. You get to see loads of different houses and loads of different people, and I kind of love finding out the story. I always ask, the buyers where they're coming from, what they're, what kind of change it is for them, and when people are, if the vendors are on site, asking them those questions about, where are you going? Because it's fascinating being part of that quite a big part of someone's life,
mm,
and just
yeah.
having those conversations, I think, is really fun. But yeah, so I think that's what drives me. And then it's just the fact that I found it quite nice in terms of work-life balance, that we're not under pressure to do a massive amount of surveys in a week. So it's been quite time to do things properly, and then also trying to get a little bit of time to park up somewhere nice with a nice view and get a little bit more of
Yeah.
North Devon that I haven't seen before.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Okay. So before we sort of wrap up our session, is there anything else you want to share particularly?
Yeah, so again, in terms of practicing what I preach and trying to encourage people to talk more about sharing what you're doing, I understand why some people don't do it, and it is scary, the idea that if you've done something, you've seen success, that anyone could come into your patch and start doing the same and then better. But if I just share some of the things that we've introduced that have been really helpful. So,
Yeah, great.
and part of this is coming in just being a different person. So where I work now, it's quite a small organisation. So when I started, there were only 3 people in the entire organisation, 1 surveyor. And you do things in a certain way because I think you do customer service in a way that you would want to have it as a customer. But generationally, this changes. So, for example, on our website, when I started, the process to get a quote for and book an inspection is you would do an online inquiry form, which is on quite a good system. And
Mm,
then it would go through to someone else and then they would look at it and give you a quote, and then that would come out afterwards. Or you'd phone up and ask questions. And I thought that's how lots of people like to do it, of an older generation. Whereas once you start going younger and younger, people like that a lot less. So I'm definitely of a generation where I don't really want to be making a phone call. And I
mm,
also want instant information. And even if I go into a shop and there's no price tags on something, my automatic assumption is it's too expensive for me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And when I go online and I can't see transparent pricing, I just think I don't want to have an awkward conversation by phone. And I want to shop around, and I don't want to have to wait however long for this person to get back to me with a quote, and then that person, I just want to go on and go, this is roughly that much, this company is roughly that much, and then also what is in a survey. So one of the things that we changed, which has been really successful, is number one, changing the website so it's got loads of information about what's in a different level survey. So there's kind of a blog page, and that's linked to from the survey page that says, here's the different levels, here's what you need to know about it.
So it's clear when they land what you're getting.
Really clear. And then a link to the RICS Home Survey Standard for anyone who wants to look more into that. And then the pricing is much more transparent now. So it says, if you want this survey, this is the price range. If you want this survey, this is the price range. And then also one of the key questions that we had is, how soon can you do it? Because even if it's within budget, if we can't do it soon enough, that's a wasted time for a customer. So we've got a code now built into the website that we update as often as needed. But it says, if you book today, you would have the report in your hand on this date.
Wow.
And it's just code that's embedded into it that says plus 10 working days or plus 12 working days from today. And if we're on holiday, we just increase it so that it reflects that. So then they have that information straight at the beginning. And then we had a few clients I'd noticed that were phoning up, getting a quote for level 2 or 3, being recommended by the agents because we have that good level of that good relationship with agents, and they trust us. But then they were saying it's a bit too expensive, or customers were saying it's a bit too expensive, but really it's outside of their budget. So rather than just the conversations we were having with, that's our price, we can't reduce it because we can't deliver the quality that we want to deliver for any less than what we're charging. We just thought, let's just step back. And I had a conversation with a customer who was in that position, and I was in his house, he was selling it. And he said, well, now that we weren't going to get a survey done because my dad's a builder, but you're here and I'm starting to doubt, should I have a survey done? And my sales approach is generally the opposite of sales, which is tell everyone all the reasons why they don't need to buy a survey from us. So I said, you don't really. If you go onto a website, there's a load of blogs that tells you what we look for. So just look for those things. He was concerned about there was a damp patch on the ceiling. I said, well, go into the roof above it. Just have a look underneath the loft insulation. If it's wet above there, then look above there. And if there's a roof leak. But then I said, well, tell you what, like if you were going to get a survey, what would you actually want? Would you be, if we were to offer something at a lower price that only looked at the key issues that the average person wouldn't know? He was like, yeah, that would suit. So I said, well, we're going to set something up. If you want to try it, send me an email. So we set up the Nova Core survey, which is kind of like a level 2, except it doesn't go into so much detail about internal doors, because people know what an internal door looks like. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't go into loads of details about kitchens and bathrooms. It just says there is a bathroom and there's no sign of a leak. And each of those little elements that we strip back saves us 5 or 10 minutes on site. And it meant that we could offer it at a much more competitive price.
Okay.
And that's been really successful. So we now do probably as many core surveys as we do level 2s.
Interesting.
But rather than just having that same constant discussion about we can't reduce the price, we said, what do people want? What do people want and how can we deliver it at a price that suits them? So that's been really successful. And it's just that we've constantly just tried to look at things like that and understand things from a customer's perspective and try and change it to suit them rather than just saying, this is what we do, this is how we've always done it.
And
those changes have been helpful.
That's a good approach because I don't think enough people do that. They don't put themselves in the position of the client. I think it's too much. We're just doing this. This is what we do.
Yeah.
But being rigid like that and not adapting to change. And, like you say, a lot of people, young generations, they just want to be able to use WhatsApp. They just want to be able to message about a survey, don't they? They don't even certainly don't want to speak to somebody.
No.
And it's everything everything being instant information makes like how they land on your website. They need to make that decision so fast.
Yeah.
That if they have to spend too much time, they'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And we'll hopefully be able to start looking at our data over the longer term. And I think there's enough old data that we could start to figure out whether we're actually getting better kind of conversion rates using this method.
So you're looking at your data as well to then help make sort of decisions on the business, the service, and how you structured and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I never thought I'd say this, because that was the biggest relief from moving across from any sort of corporate world, was not having to have meetings about meetings and meetings that should have been emails and 10 spreadsheets that you have to do every month and different KPIs. I was so glad to leave that behind, but I have kind of got to a point now to think, oh, it would be nice to maybe have like a monthly team meeting. And I've just this week drafted our first kind of KPI sheet that just looks at our key metrics, so that we could start to understand what's going on. And some of it will be that kind of conversion rate. How many quotes are we doing and how many are actually turning into surveys?
Mm.
And then also the key metric, I think, is complaints and claims. As the business is growing and we've got more surveyors coming in and we're delivering more surveys, it's inevitable that we may have more claims. But I really want to understand it in context of how many. So that's part of putting all these metrics together. Is it will eventually be how many claims are you receiving per 100 surveys, or if that's not, that might be a little bit skewed because it's not that many if it is per 1,000 surveys or whatever it is. So then you can compare it year on year. And if the whole networking works out, that you can anonymize that data and chat with other surveyors and go, well, how many are you getting per 100 surveys? And what are your lessons learned in terms of this is lessons the kind learned. Of, and it's just, I love lessons learned, and it's so important within your organization. But if you can learn from other people's mistakes, then, or even not mistakes, just their experiences, then again, you're going to be benefiting everyone. And I think in terms of this whole, when we're talking about nationally and what we're doing, the reason why I think it's really important is because what we do and the quality of service that we provide does have an impact on other surveyors elsewhere in the country, because our customers aren't staying where they're moving. That's the whole point. So if I deliver a bad service here, that customer might move to Birmingham and might not commission a survey in Birmingham because they think that surveyors aren't worth it. Or vice versa. If I deliver a good service, that person's more likely to then commission a survey somewhere else in the country. And you see, I follow some of the forums, just kind of figure out what are people saying about this. And it is very, very mixed. But I think the better we are as a sector and as a profession, the more likely we are all to be sustainable in business, because we want RICS surveys to be credible.
Yes, absolutely. You're spot on there, because, and it's also, people just know it, people are family, friends, everywhere. So if someone has a bad survey in the south and they chat to a friend, oh, it was awful, wasn't worth it. And that person could live anywhere in Scotland, anywhere. Well, not Scotland, they're up front, but, in England. And they're like, oh, well, they got one, I won't bother. And it just spreads like that. And then social media, as you know, it spreads. Because I did some analysis recently on Reddit. I did some whole deep research on Reddit and some of the forums there, and what are people talking about with surveys and where the misconceptions, and that was extremely interesting to people's perceptions. And they're like, oh, too many caveats, it wasn't worth it, or they didn't do this, they didn't do that. And it's, I think, like you say, working together, even though surveyors don't necessarily want to share certain things, the fact is that it's doing the whole profession an injustice, because if there's no consistency and everything you're doing is going to have this knock-on effect in future generations.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, worst case scenario, if commercially you don't feel it's appropriate to speak to someone really close to you, then just find someone in a neighbouring county and start that networking with them, just somewhere where you feel safe that it's not going to impact on your business. But I do think it's important to do it. And I feel okay with it, but people always say that surveying can be quite lonely. So if it's just for that, just having someone to chat to about stuff, I think is really important, so you don't get lost in it.
I think it's so true. It's one of the motivations behind the surveying room, the community, because I've always had people say and message and say, it's so many people have said it's lonely, and it's nice I can just dip in here and talk to someone if I want to, or because can be isolating, because we have so many SMEs and small businesses across the UK, don't we? Lots of independents.
Exactly. And I think I've been lucky starting where I have, because we've got a trainee who's she's just qualified. But I've been able to have someone come around with me on quite a few surveys. So at least once a week, I've got someone with me for a bit of company. So that's been quite nice. Yeah, that's
great. Yeah, I can imagine. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, or is there anywhere in particular or something, is there anywhere in particular you'd like to send people to?
Yeah, I would say most of my contact externally is via LinkedIn.
Okay.
But all the things that I've talked about, if anyone is thinking, do you know what, I do want to start the process of reviewing what we're doing in a similar way,
Yeah.
take a look at the website, because it's out there. That's
What website is that?
novasurveyors.co.uk.
Nova Surveyors. All the things that you have mentioned today are just so good, and I think it's so much more of what we need. That whole collaboration piece between the profession, between other professionals such as estate agents, that, you know, networking and learning from each other, because all of this collaboration will only just improve surveys, the quality, the service, and then the public's perception of them.
Yeah, I think so. Anxiety.
When I've been to some events, and, you know, one of the most popular sort of discussion topics or panels or everything are always around complaints handling.
Yeah. So I'm really comfortable with complaints because I've dealt with it so much in previous roles that I kind of understand the
Right.
process and understand this is how you put it together and this is how you review it. I'd feel very differently.
I think you're inspiring, Rosie, I must admit. I think that the things that you're doing are just really forward thinking and really what the profession needs, to be honest. And I think there's a lot people can take away from our conversation.
Yeah, hopefully. And it's just paying back everything that everyone's kind of offered me in the past 10 years or so.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of information. Someone else been wandering around the background.
So wave him. Yeah, it's been super to talk to you today, Rosie, and thank you very much for your time as well. After following all your things on LinkedIn, I was very keen to talk to you, and I'm glad I have. There's been some great insights today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for the platform.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.